So what we're going to be talking about today, so there's a bit of a kind of story essentially that we're going to follow for Copilot for Microsoft 365. So when we talk about Copilot, we're talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365, which spans all the kind of Office suite products, Outlook, Teams, OneNote, and so on. Now, the story is essentially around how Valto consultants are using this. And what I mean by that is it's telling a story from the very beginning of where we've got an email will come in from our salesperson. And essentially what we're looking to do is book in a workshop. And we're going to look at how Copilot can be used to sort of draft emails, summarize emails, and different things we can do in there. Then we're going to be looking at Copilot inside of Teams. Now, essentially what we're going to be doing inside of Teams is using Microsoft Teams as where we conduct our workshops. So as a consultant, when we're speaking to people and we're getting kind of their requirements, we do this, we can do it in person, but we also do it quite often with people on Microsoft Teams. So we're going to use Copilot to essentially generate ideas how we can improve our meetings to get more from those meetings. Also, we're going to be using it as a way to generate kind of minutes and actions and things like that to sort of export afterwards. We're going to use OneNote as a place where we store our sort of drafts, our notes and things like that from the workshops that take place. And then we're going to have our Excel essentially is where we'll have things like when we're talking to our customers, we quite often have a spreadsheet like a sitemap. So this workshop we're going to be planning in this story is a SharePoint workshop, and we're going to be filling out an Excel spreadsheet of SharePoint sites that the customer has requested throughout that workshop. Then we're going to use Excel to do some analysis and get some insights on that. We're then going to be transitioning all the kind of notes and things like that which we captured from Excel and OneNote that came from that workshop inside Microsoft Teams into a report. So we're going to use Copilot to generate a report from those notes, and we're going to look at what that looks like. And this is almost like the detailed proposal that we then give to our customers. However, it's usually quite a long document that we give to our customers. It's at least 5,000 words. It's very in-depth, very detailed. It contains screenshots and graphs and things like that. So quite often what we'll do is we'll then create a PowerPoint to give us a presentation back to our customer to say, read the report in your own time. However, here is a PowerPoint they're going to walk you through step by step what it is we're proposing. So that's the story from beginning to end. So I'm going to walk you through now some examples as we go through. So starting off our story, our Copilot journey, as a consultant, quite often we'll get an email from someone who works in sales. So in this case, you can see here, we've got an email from Sam, who's basically telling me that we need to book in a SharePoint workshop. Now, I don't know about you, but these emails can quite often be very lengthy. Now, this is just a dummy sample email, so it's not too lengthy, but quite often our salespeople are talking to prospects and customers and things like that for a long time. And these email threads can then get very, very long. So what we can do is we can use Copilot to summarize this email thread. So you can see here it's saying Joe Bloggs has reached out to Valto for a SharePoint intranet. Sam's asked if we can book in a SharePoint workshop. The customer has informed Sam that they're only available on Wednesdays and Thursdays for a workshop session. Sam has asked to book a workshop in. The conversation is about scheduling a SharePoint workshop for Contoso, as in the customer. So we can see here very quickly a summary of everything that we need. So as a consultant now, I don't need to go back through and read through hundreds potentially of emails that are inside of this email thread. Instead, I can use Copilot to summarize that message and get the key action points that I need to pay attention to directly at the top of that email for me. So now that I understand what Copilot has asked me to do, I can then draft a response using Copilot. So this allows me to type in a piece of text. Whoops, Sorry, I've just jumped back here. So this allows me to sort of type in a piece of text. Now I've just, a bit like Blue Peter, here's one I made earlier. I've put in a little prompt myself to say, please write a response to Joe Blogs. Blows asks to book in a 15-minute introduction call. On the call, we can compare calendars to book in the actual workshop. So quite often, as a consultant, I don't go ahead and just book the workshop there and then. What I do is I book an introduction call with the customer first, just to introduce myself, show that I'm a nice, friendly face, and we're going to be working together and things like that. And we then book in the workshop whilst we're sort of on the call together. We can look at each other's calendars. So what this is then going to do is allow me to then specify the potential tone of voice of the response that it's going to generate. And of course, I'm going to be able to view the response and even edit it before it's sent. However, I can choose to have either a very direct tone, a neutral tone, a sort of formal or casual tone, or even, I don't really know why Microsoft done this, I think it's just because they can, you can make it a poem as well. You can choose the length, whether you want it to be a short response, a medium response, or a long response. But what I imagine is over time that Copilot will have additional kind of tones of voice and things like that you could add in here. And potentially even in time, it could learn the way that you respond in your emails, and then there'll be a potential drop down which could say, make this sound more like me. So it could use your own tone of voice. But in this case, I'm going to select that I want it to be quite casual and I want it to be quite a long response. Now, when I say long, it's not going to be that long. You'll see it's only realistically a paragraph or two, but it just shows a bit more kind of detail here. So you can see here now it's generated this to say, hi, Sam, thanks for forwarding this to me. I'm happy to book in a workshop with Joe Blogs from Contoso. How about we have a quick introduction call first? So you can see here it's already pulling out key details. It knows the customer name, as in the company name. It knows the actual contact, as in Joe Blogs. And it's pulled all of this together in a really good contextual way. So if I wanted to, I could make alterations to this. So if I wanted to make it a little bit longer, or if I wanted to change the tone of voice, make it a bit more formal or something like that, I could do. I could also type into that box to say, maybe change the tone of voice, maybe make it sound. A pretty cool thing actually is I quite like to get it to change it to sound like a particular celebrity, for example, if there's a tone of voice, or even a company. So if there's a company out there that you like the way that they write their messages and things like that, or their emails to you, I quite like, for example, Octopus Energy. I think they've got a great tone of voice that they use in their emails and social media and things like that. So you could ask it to style it based on another company if you wish. So there you go. I asked it to make it a little bit longer, and it's made that post a little bit longer for me. So just to recap, the consultants received the long email. We've saved time by using Copilot to summarize that email. We've got key details summarized in that post that Copilot's provided to us. We discovered we needed to book an intro call, and we used Copilot to draft that response. We selected the tone of voice, that it was casual, and we chose the length of the text. We even got it to make it a little bit longer if we wanted to, where we could have made any other alterations. Now we're happy with that, and we send that email to the customer to book in that meeting. So now going back to our story, we've now booked in our introduction call. We've now had that introduction call with the customer, and we've booked in our workshop. So the next thing that is going to happen in the story is the consultant, as in myself, I'm going to go into the meeting with the customer, and we're going to talk about the requirements of their SharePoint project. So when you're inside of Teams, you're going to treat almost Copilot. Think of it almost like another team member. It's always kind of listening and taking notes as you're going through. And we're going to see how we can extract this from the meeting afterwards. But you could also ask it to generate questions as well. So say, for example, you're in a meeting and maybe the sort of ideas have run a little bit dry or something like that. You could ask Copilot, say, what questions can I ask the group to generate more ideas? So this is then going to give you a prompt. It's going to say, okay, how about we talk about X, Y, and Z, and it'll give you a little bit more of a prompt about actually what you can ask people to get more from the meeting. So that's going to improve the overall kind of output that you have. So as a consultant, quite often We can be talking to people, we can come up with our own ideas, but we can treat Copilot as another kind of sort of set of eyes, pair of ears, that we can say, what do you think, Copilot? What other questions could we be asking? And it might not be something that we would have thought of ourselves. So it's a good way of having kind of ideas created inside of your meetings. So then inside of the Teams meeting, not only is it able to give you prompts and give you ideas about how we could be essentially getting more from our meetings and things like that, but also we can use Copilot inside of Teams meetings to be capturing the key requirements. So it means we can spend time in the meeting actually focused on thinking about the meeting. And although, okay, if I'm totally honest, as a consultant, we would still probably be taking some high-level notes and things like that in the background. But we have this kind of trust that Copilot also has our back, that's going to be taking notes on our behalf. So let's take a little look at what this would look like. So inside of a Teams meeting, or even after the team meeting, actually, you can go back inside of Teams and you can ask it, say, for example, what we're doing here is asking it, what were the biggest fears and concerns, as well as what are people most excited about? So you can get the kind of high level gist of the kind of requirements that people have from the meeting, and it will then give it you sort of back in a nice kind of list here to sort of say, for example, here, Deepak, the biggest concern was to consolidate all the updates into a comprehensive report. So now we know Deepak's biggest kind of concern, and I can make sure I've taken a kind of note of this that can go into my workshop report afterwards, so that people can see that their key requirements have been captured. So not only is it sort of taking notes, it's getting those insights that you might have missed to summarize essentially what the meeting was about, the key kind of topics, and it's almost distilling it, boiling it down and consolidating the maybe, for example, a workshop might be 3 hours long. So we can boil this down to be something that's much smaller into a neater set of notes. So I quite like using this, as I say, to get the key areas of concerns. What are people most excited about? And then I use that in my report as a kind of way to show that we understand the vital parts that we need to make sure go well, and it gets our customer on side. So the final thing then inside of Teams is we can get the kind of extract the kind of minutes, the actions from that meeting, and we can export this out. So inside of Copilot, you can see we can go in and we can say, what are the key topics from, and then we can ask it a meeting that we took part in. Format each section with bold headings, and then this is where we can then get a export of the key points that was raised during that particular meeting. So we'll just get rid of that. So you can see here, it's talking about the carbon offset report, stakeholder feedback, budget updates, and it's showing me who had what to say. So we can get that full extract of that meeting. So often these kind of extracts that we're pulling out using Copilot can act as the basis of our report. Now, there's other things that we, of course, will add, and there's more investigations that will often need to be done after the workshop has actually taken place. However, it gives us a really good basis of the requirements that we've talked about and things that we've discussed and agreed during those workshops, and we can export that out. So it's going to contain all the key information that we need. We can export it out and we can put it into OneNote. And in fact, I'm going to show you in the next kind of video how we can do that. We then store, usually quite often what will take place as a consultant, I would already have the OneNote created, and I might have taken some manual notes and things like that. But then I can export these notes, these minutes, these actions from Teams and put it alongside my manually taken notes. So that's the next kind of bit where we're going to be looking at OneNotes. Now we've got the workshops taking place, and we want to get those notes, those actions, what people are excited about, what people are concerned about. We want to get them into our OneNote, into our notes area. So as I say, often consultants are taking their own notes. Eventually, I'm sure we'll get to a point where we're all 100% Copilot, but I think whilst we're sort of in this transitional stage, we're still taking high-level notes just because it's human nature to do what we've kind of previously done, but we're slowly moving to this kind of era of AI is going to do all of this for us. But we can combine these notes that Copilot has taken, and we can extract them as a meeting summary into OneNote. We can combine that with our own notes, essentially. So I'm just going to show you here an example. Here's the meeting. It's got the meeting notes here. We can just click on copy, and then we can paste it into OneNote, and then we've got our notes available directly inside of OneNote. We can then, for example, we might want to create a to-do list. So something that's very common after a workshop as a consultant is there might be some follow-up actions. There might be some things that we couldn't answer during the workshop and we needed to go away and do some investigation. Or maybe there's something that the customer couldn't answer and we needed to follow up with them to say, can you provide me that information after this workshop? So we need to create a to-do list. So with those notes that we've now got in OneNote, we could go into Copilot and say, please now create me a to-do list based on these actions. So there you go. You can see it's created that to-do list and it's asking that we can say, add the team, share slides with the team after the call as an action. So a very common thing after a workshop is to share the kind of information that we've been presenting throughout the workshop. Whoops, jump ahead there. Cool. So just as a recap then, so the consultants often take their own notes, we extract them into OneNote, we combine the notes that Copilot's taken with OneNote, and we can do things like asking it questions, creating task lists. Something else I often do as well is like, when we've conducted a workshop, it might be, say, for example, that as a consultant, we could end up doing 2 or 3 workshops a week. And it might be, say, a few days later, or maybe it depends if the workshop was on a Friday, we might not be doing the write-up until Monday, Tuesday, the next week. And over the weekend, do you know what I mean? We've had a few beers, we've been out, and we might need to refresh ourselves a little bit on Monday morning about what was the key kind of topics. And that's where we can use Copilot to go back and say, what were the key things that we discussed? What was the key requirements that came from this? And we can get that extracted from our notes using Copilot. We can also do things like creation of tables as well using Copilot. So another cool thing that I often do with the notes section inside of OneNote is I might say, please create me a stakeholder table. So create a table of all the stakeholders that were in the meeting, and maybe I could say include their key sort of concerns as a column and their key objectives or what they're excited about as another column. Something else we often use tables for is like the objectives. What's the objectives of this particular project? What are we trying to achieve? It's a SharePoint project, okay? Is it a SharePoint intranet? How many sites do we think we're going to have? How are we going to roll this out? Are we going to have a pilot group of users? How are we going to do X, Y, Z? And we can have those objectives pulled out using Copilot and put straight into a table. But there's so many other ways that we could use this to interrogate the information and get insights from this. The other element that we often provide a bit of analysis around is we use Excel. So for example, in a SharePoint workshop, we would often be talking with our customer about, well, what SharePoint sites are you going to need? So an intranet isn't just one site, it's a collection of sites. You might have a site for IT department, for the HR department, for operations, for marketing. There's loads of different SharePoint sites that you might need. So as part of that requirements gathering, quite often we would be sort of manually putting together a kind of a spreadsheet, a table, listing out all the different SharePoint sites we're going to need, the departments that then own those SharePoint sites, as well as the content owner. So who is going to be the owner of that content, as well as things like, is it restricted or is it an open site? Is it a team site? Is it a communication site? But there's, in the real world, there'll be loads of other types of variables that we'd need to keep track of as well. This is just a sample, it's just a dummy file. So this is what we know as our kind of site map, essentially. So this is what all the different SharePoint sites are going to include. So what we can then do is we can use Copilot to provide some insights and analysis on this. So we might say visualize the amount of team sites versus communication sites. So we would like to know roughly, do we have more communication sites or do we have more team sites that we're going to create as part of this particular project? It can then understand the data and it's going to analyze that, and then it's going to provide it as a table. Now, once it's provided it as a table, we could, in fact, we could add it to either reword it, sorry, not reword it, reorder it if we want to say make it sort of the largest amount of teams at the top or something like that. But we can also choose to add it directly into a new tab inside of the Excel file. So we can break that information out so we can see it later. We might ask other questions like which content owner has got the most sites. So it might not be very fair if there's just one person that's got all the sites, or actually you're expecting that one person should be having more sites. So you could ask that question. So we can see here that Derek has got 8 sites. So he's the #1 content owner out of all of these SharePoint sites. But you might ask it to refine it and say, show me a list of the numbers starting with the who's got the most sites. So you could make sure that there's a fair split, so it wasn't all just going to one person potentially. And there we can say, what is the most common type of site? Is it restricted or is it open? And actually, in this case, we've got 51 sites which are restricted. So again, it's just giving these kind of insights that maybe aren't standing out directly inside of an Excel spreadsheet. And I know a lot of people who potentially are Excel gurus and wizards and things like that would be able to say, oh, well, we could create a pivot table and we could do this and we could do that for some of these examples. But not everybody is an Excel specialist. And that's where Copilot is like your sort of right-hand man in this sense, that you can ask it a question and it will go off and it'll get that information and it'll serve it back to you without you having to be an Excel specialist to know all these ways that you could pull this information out using a bit of data analysis and visualizations and tables and pivot charts and all that sort of stuff. But as I say, we could ask it other questions. So how many sites are there per department? So we could see quite often what I'm interested in as a consultant is there a particular department which has gone nuts with the amount of SharePoint sites that they've got, and they've said, oh, we're going to have 50 SharePoint sites, but every other department's only got 5, for example. And in that case, we might want to look at that and go, actually, guys, there's too many there. Let's rein that back in a little bit. Or do you actually need to have that? You could say which content owner has the most sites, we've seen before, to make sure there's a fair split. And are there more open or restricted sites? Asking for, do I feel like there should be mostly restricted sites? Or from the conversations I was having with a customer, actually, do they want more of an open kind of platform? So maybe we need to revisit that and talk about the requirements. So all of this information then we essentially can use as part of our report. We could copy the table into the Excel document. We can sort of boil it down to be exactly the type of insights that we want. We could maybe copy some of these insights that Copilot has created and export them, put them into our report. So that's Excel. So now we've got the kind of requirements. Sorry, I've just seen a message saying someone saying that they can't see my screen. I'm going to try and reshare my screen a sec. Bear me 2 seconds. Cool. So hopefully, looking at around the office now, got the thumbs up. People can see my my screen again. It's quite funny actually. Although I saw the comment come up on the chat, I've got some people outside my I'm in a meeting room who came running over and said the screen's gone down. So there we go. So we can see the screen now. So just a recap, if you sort of missed that last piece. We've got Excel now, we've got our SharePoint sites into that Excel file, we've got our Copilot to give us some analysis on things like who's got the most content, which department has got it, things like that. So essentially, we can then use all this information and we can export it out into our report, which is what we're going to come on to talking about now. So now we've done all of our analysis, we've got all of our drafts, we've got our notes, we've got our notes inside of OneNote, we've got our Excel documents of kind of SharePoint sites that we need and things like that. We now want to create a Word file from OneNote. So we now want to create our OneNote where we can we can now create our Word document from our OneNote, which is going to act as our proposal. It's going to give us our specification document that we're going to give to our customer. It will contain our workshop notes sort of drafted out into more of a report style. It can also include any kind of relevant files that we've used. It won't necessarily be perfect, but even if it could get you 60, 70% of the way there, we're finding as a consultant that potentially this this might save you, well, for example, it used to take us a couple of days to write a report, whereas now we're talking hours rather than days. So it can really help speedline and streamline what it is that you're doing. So let's take a little look at an example here. So this is Copilot in Word. So when we open up Copilot, we can ask it, for example, to create a document. So we can say draft a proposal from this particular meeting, and we tell it that the meeting notes that we've got from OneNote, and we can even say make it look like a particular document that we've created in the past before. So one of the things that I often get asked is about can you use templates inside of Copilot? And the answer is at the moment no, but what you can do is you can ask it to say, can you make it look like a previous document that you've created, and it can take the styling from that. So there we go. So there we can say, make it look like this particular document, and then there we go. We've styled up our document to make it look more like our brand. We could ask it to say, I've drafted to add a summary as well. So it's going to take that kind of information and it's going to provide a little bit of a summary. And again, from my experience, this isn't going to be 100% perfect the first time. However, it is going to get you at least, say, 60% of the way there. It's going to draft things out. You could get it to rewrite it as well. So just like what we looked at in Outlook, where we could say, change the tone of voice, for example. So it's actually going to sound either more formal, more sort of direct, more casual. You could change the tone of voice as well. And you can always ask it to change the overall sort of look and feel as well by changing it to say, please make it look like this particular document. So that's how we can then create our report inside of Word. So this is now an example of a report that we've then created. So showing you how we've done it. This is a rough example of a Valto report we've then created. So it will extract out things like the stakeholders, the objectives. We can get it to take out tables of information that might have been inside our OneNote. It can even pull across things like screenshots and images as well. So we can always choose to add more content as well. So often the consultants are looking for ways to convey value. So in this case, for a SharePoint intranet, we want to stress the importance of how a user interface, a nicely designed SharePoint intranet, user interface is so important for a nicely designed SharePoint intranet. So we can ask it to create something brand new. So this isn't from our notes. We can say, write me a paragraph that explains the importance of a SharePoint design for UI. So it'll then generate us a draft response that we can choose to review, we can choose to edit, we can choose to amend it, we can get it to rewrite it if we wanted to before we sort of keep it inside of our document. But there you go, it's now said SharePoint design is a crucial aspect for creating a user-friendly, engaging internet solution. SharePoint design allows the customization of the look and feel, layout, navigation, so on. So it's then given us a nice little paragraph that we've got to work with. So this isn't based on the notes I put in. This has actually come up with this itself based on the information that it knows about SharePoint, essentially from its own chat model. So as I say, we can leverage Copilot to write our paragraphs and include this in our report. We can always choose to change this slightly if we wanted to. So if we wanted to say, make this longer, we could specify that in our prompt and it would make it longer. If we wanted to put in a little bit more kind of information, say, how does this relate to, like, why is it important for adoption or something like that, you get it to include key aspects that you wanted to include as part of that text. So next, consultants want to ensure we have captured all the information. We want to present it back in its simplest form, avoid using tech jargon. All objectives have been documented and concerns have been addressed. This gives us our best chance securing the project. So what we can do is we can ask Copilot for its opinion. So quite often what I'll do with Copilot, and this is in loads of different scenarios, this isn't just this particular scenario, but ask Copilot to essentially take the role essentially of somebody. And in this case, what I'm asking is, I want you to take the role of the customer receiving this SharePoint intranet proposal. Is there anything missing from it that would influence your decision to proceed with the project? So this is now Copilot taking a persona, taking a role. It's now going to think that it's the customer, and it's going to analyze this document with almost like a different hat on, a different pair of eyes. And it's going to give me some information that maybe I haven't quite thought of as part of this process of me creating this report. So it's now looking the whole document over, it's getting rid of information together. But what it'll also do is it'll compare the documents that it knows that are similar. So you can see here, whoops, sorry, I clicked away there now. There we go. So it's working on it, it's comparing the documents that it's looking over. But the important thing is that it's comparing through documents, emails, and chats that might be relevant. So it's not just thinking about this particular document, it's also going to look at other previous workshop reports that I've done. To maybe come back and say, well, on the last workshop report that you did, you included a section about security, and you've not included a section about security in this workshop report. Make sure that you mention security. So it's going to comb through those different documents, emails, and chats, and it's then going to come back with some suggestions and some ideas about how it could be potentially improved. So it's just being pushed a little bit off the page here, but there we go. We're just going to scroll up. Scroll up. Hang on. Let's just make that a bit wider so you can see. Sorry, clicked away again. So you can see the insights it's given, and let me just go back a little bit. The insights that it's given, as a customer receiving the SharePoint intranet proposal, there are several key elements that I would consider essential for making an informed decision to proceed with your project. So from your document, so now it's going to list out some things which my document does include. It includes objectives, it includes sections about design and user experience, it includes sections about project details, the authority decision makers, the security and compliance, and things like that. But also, it's saying from your company, past performance information on the vendor's past performance, case studies, client references. So it's basically saying that potentially I could improve this document by including more things about case studies and where we've worked with customers doing SharePoint projects and things like that before. So it's sort of bolstering out the kind of the authority and the kind of trust of this particular report. Additional considerations, so integration with existing systems. So actually something that I know isn't included in this sample report is any mention about how this new SharePoint intranet is going to integrate with existing systems, which actually is a really good point. And I know this is a demo example, but I didn't get it to prompt this. And I thought this was a fantastic suggestion from Copilot, because actually it's really important when you're thinking about SharePoint intranet to think about how is this going to work with other apps and systems and things like that that we have in-house. So maybe I should include a section about integrating to existing systems, and I could talk about how we could use navigation bars to link to things like payroll systems to get information on our pay slips, HR external portals, Breathe HR if you use a portal like that. Maybe your pay slips are in Sage and you want to have a link which links off into that. So we could talk about the integrations a little bit more. Maybe also, I haven't included a section in this report yet about training and support. And of course, Valto, we offer training and support along with these projects. So of course, I should be adding a section inside of my report to talk a little bit more about this. So, and then it's just going to give me a little summary to sort of say these elements are crucial for ensuring that SharePoint Internet will meet the needs of the organization and provides a return on investment. It's also important to consider any potential risks and how they will be mitigated. Just providing some really good insights. This is almost like having one of my consultant colleagues sat next to me reviewing my document. So before I've even given my workshop report to a colleague to review, which is what we always do, we always swap to review to give each other feedback. I can actually have a pair of eyes give me feedback, use Copilot as a way of giving me feedback before I pass it to a colleague, and Copilot might pick up on things which is going to save my colleague having to review it, and actually he can say, for example, he might have picked up on 5 things, Copilot might have picked up on 3 or 4 of those things, so actually he's saved time having to give me feedback. So this is a fantastic way that we can make sure that our reports are being reviewed and getting feedback on this. I've also seen this used for things like getting responses on things like tenders and things like that. So say, for example, you're putting a tender response together and you want to make sure that you've got the best chance of winning that. You could ask Copilot to take the persona of the person that's going to be scoring that tender and say, this tender response I'm putting together, how would you score it? What do you think I should include? What should be better based on a criteria document that lives here, for example? So just going back to this as a point, I say we use this because we want to make sure we've got the best chance after a workshop of winning the SharePoint project with our customer. So we're using this to get some insights that we might have missed being a single pair of eyes on it. So we're asking Copilot to take on the role of the customer to see what it thinks, and then it can provide a little bit of input. So that gives us information. So it's told us things like include some information on past projects, which is all about building trust and showing sort of authority that we've done this in the past before. It's talked about the integration of the existing systems. Also, one thing else that I've seen it tell me based on this when I've demoed this in the past before is to provide a timeline. Again, this document doesn't contain a timeline, but often customers want to know what's going to happen and in what order. Cool. So just as a little recap then, so we've had our workshop in Teams, we've taken our notes in OneNote, we've got some analysis from the sitemap inside of Excel, and now we've created our proposal, our workshop report inside of Word. Now, these documents are usually very long, as I say. They can be very, very kind of long documents, 5, 6, 7,000 words, something like that. So we wouldn't necessarily want to jump on a call with a customer and have to run through the whole thing with them. We'll give it to them to sort of digest, but we want to have a kind of sort of presentation for them to run them through what it is that we're actually proposing for them. And that's where we would then create a PowerPoint. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a PowerPoint directly from the Word report that we created. I should also mention, guys, very soon we're going to be getting to the kind of Q&A portion of this webinar. So if you've got any questions at all, I can see people already starting to add questions into the live chat box. Please make sure that you're adding any questions that you've got into the live chat area, and I'll be answering those very shortly. So let's jump into the PowerPoint section. So as I say, we've created our Word report, quite lengthy. We now want to create a presentation that we can then present back to our customer to say, here's the key summary points. So inside of PowerPoint, we can just open up a fresh blank PowerPoint, click on Copilot, and actually one of the default prompts that it has at the very top of Copilot is it will say, we want to create a presentation from a file. So we can create a presentation about something if we wanted to, give it a topic and go off and create it. Or I can say, I want you to create a presentation from this Contoso SharePoint workshop report. What that will then do is it will then basically go through all of the kind of key aspects of that Word document. And one thing I'm finding at the moment is it quite often aligns a lot of the slides to some of the key headers. So if the headers in your document, like the H1s, the H2s, H3s, are prominent, you'll quite often find it will create a slide for that and base information around it. So quite often it will create more than you need. Quite often it will create, say for example, a presentation, I only really want, say, 10 slides, but it will quite often create maybe, say, 30 from a workshop report, which is very large. And then I can go through and delete the ones that I don't want it to contain anymore. You can also see a little progress bar there at the bottom, so you can see where Copilot's up to, how far it is away from actually creating it. And there we go. It's almost complete. It's created us our slides. So quite often it's very plain. It's just sort of, it's not got any form of template or design or theme or anything like that that's applied to it. But it's done quite a good job. It's got a slide for an agenda, an introduction. It's got a slide for workshop overview as a nice table. It's got the objectives in there, the importance of design and things like that. It can also bring across all these different tables and other kind of information. But it'd be then down to me to go in and go, actually, I can remove out some of these different kind of slides. I don't need them. We could also then easily apply some brand colors, themes, designs, and things like that to style it up to make it look how we want to with our particular design, to make it look like it's our company colors and theme. Again, we could always use that kind of ability that we saw inside the Word document to say, make this document look like another document. So it essentially, to recap, we've got our Word report. We've asked PowerPoint to create a presentation from that Word report. Copilot has taken a couple of minutes to process this, and if I'm honest, that demo video is sort of paused and then sped up. It does take, at the moment, a good 60 to 90 seconds, something like that, to create. So bear with it if it is creating it, especially if it's coming from such a large file. If you create it from a smaller Word document, it doesn't take as long. But when you're talking these big, meaty documents, it does take a minute or two. So then it shows you, it will show you the work in progress, and it will show you what slides are going to be created. So the cool thing, which was just slightly off screen in that demo, is it will also show you as it's going along all the different slides it plans on creating. Now you could, if you wanted to, if you didn't think it was right, you could also stop where that progress bar is. You could choose to stop the Copilot prompt and get it to restart again if you wanted to say something like, please don't include an introduction, for example. So if you didn't want it to create that slide from the offset. But I tend to find it's better to let it have a bit of creative freedom, create what it needs to create, and then go and just remove the slides that we don't want afterwards. So as I say, you can cancel it if it's wrong. And once it's finished, you go and refine it, remove any slides you don't need, and you can apply your color theme. It's also worth mentioning as well that you can choose to style PowerPoint with Copilot. So, for example, here we've created our presentation with Copilot, and say, for example, it's chosen a font that we don't like, and we want it to change that. So we could say, change all the fonts in this presentation to a particular type of font. There you can see it's automatically gone through and it's applied all of the fonts to the headers automatically. So there's things like that which you can do to speed up the process. If you wanted to do something quickly, you could get it to go through. So rather than, say, for example, if we've got a 10, 15 slides, it could take me 10 minutes to go through and change all the fonts of all the different headers. Instead, Copilot can do it, and it'll only take me 10 seconds. Now, there'll be loads of other things in the future that you'll be able to do to style your PowerPoints and documents using Copilot. So although templates aren't available just yet, you can use the prompts, make this file look like another file, and it will then style it around that for you. Cool. So just before we start jumping into some of the Q&A sections and things like that, I just want to do a quick final run through of what we've talked about today. So we've looked at Outlook. We start our story by getting an email. We've summarized it using Copilot. So if there was a very lengthy email, we've summarized it using Copilot to get the key actions that we needed to do, which was essentially book in the workshop with the customer. We then booked in the workshop and we conducted the workshop using Teams, and we used Copilot to help with that meeting, to give us ideas about how we could improve the meeting, as well as capturing things like the key things that people are excited about, their fears, concerns, and basically the vital things that we need to know as requirements for our customers. Then we use Copilot to extract all the kind of key meetings, minutes and notes and things like that from Teams, and we then exported them into OneNote. We could then use OneNote to either recap, ask it questions, gain insights, and we also created a to-do list. So we could use a to-do list that we could follow up with actions of we need to speak to the customer about something, or we need to do some further investigations. We then had Excel. So during the workshop, we will have been creating a sitemap of all the different SharePoint sites that we needed, and then we used Copilot in Excel to provide some insights. Who's got the most content? Which department's got the most sites? Things like that. We then used Copilot to create our Word report using OneNote and using Excel as documents to reference to pull information back into that Word report. And then finally, we wanted to create a presentation based on that report that we can give back to our customer. And we used Copilot instead of PowerPoint to create a presentation directly from that Word report. So before we sort of jump into the Q&A section, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you how Valto could help you with Copilot. So we're offering fixed price packages to help set up and adopt Copilot. So the objective of our Copilot workshop, which is the first point of call for anything that we do a workshop. So the first thing that we do is a workshop, which is £1,500 at the time of recording, I should say. So if you're watching this in 5 years' time, the price might be a bit different, but right now, that's the price that we've got. And essentially, the workshop is to ensure you understand all the different aspects of Copilot, the different services, and also realize the value that it could bring. So how Copilot can bring different types of ways of automating or speeding up, streamlining processes within your organization. So it's not just generic things we talk about. We're talking specifically about your organization and how it can help you and find use cases for that. Following on from the workshop, we then offer fixed price setup and adoption. So the full deployment of Copilot, we handle the license deployment as well as the adoption, giving you a strategy plan, training, and a full comprehensive roadmap of how your organization is going to properly and successfully adopt Copilot. So rough idea of what that kind of first workshop would look like. So rough kind of introductions, objective setting of what it would mean to you to actually have Copilot set up. Then we talk about Copilot in terms of the different aspects of Copilot, including Copilot in Windows, what is now known as Copilot, but it was formerly the Bing chat elements, Copilot for Microsoft 365, and all the different aspects that Copilot brings. We talk about the preparation, so how you need to make sure your data is cleansed, anything that needs to be migrated, we assess the security. We talk about licenses, so how should it be licensed, how it's licensed, the costs of it, maybe pilot groups and things like that. And then the adoption. So actually, Valto are adoption specialists. Now, I know I sound like I'm kind of blowing my own trumpet here, but we have a modern work specialization for adoption change management. So we are the true solutions partner, the specialists of adoption. So if you are thinking about using Copilot, then come to us. We can talk to you about how we can use our tried and tested methods to ensure that the product is properly adopted in your organization. Cool. So I know I'm saying one final thing for Q&A, but obviously we're doing this on YouTube. We do webinars almost on a monthly basis, but we also have loads of really useful videos, not just about Copilot, but about Power Apps, SharePoint, Azure, loads of stuff about Microsoft 365. So if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe to the channel. So one one final thing. We've got an opportunity for you to win a £25 Amazon gift voucher. So during the Q&A, so I'm going to leave this slide up now whilst we go to the Q&A, but during the Q&A, we've roughly got about 100 people that have joined today's webinar. So you've got about a 1 in 100 chance of winning the voucher, which will randomly select who it is in the next 2 weeks. All you need to do is just fill out our Copilot survey. So there's a little QR code for you to scan there. And we'll also send an email out to everybody afterwards with the link as well. So essentially, what the survey is just about is just letting us know what your thoughts are on Copilot. Did you enjoy this webinar? But also, are you planning on rolling out Copilot to your organization? And if you would like to have a free consultation, there's a little box at the bottom that says that we can give you a call back as well. So we offer a free 1-hour consultation to talk about Copilot and how potentially we could be helping you with that. So please scan that code, fill out the survey, and as I say, if you want to have a call back, free consultation, there's a little checkbox at the bottom of that survey. So we'll jump in now to the Q&A and just have a little look at what questions that people are asking. I see Copilot. I see Copilot logo at bottom of screen, but where is it on Outlook? Okay, so the reason being is you will have the Copilot symbol at the bottom of Windows because that is actually available to everybody, regardless if they've got the kind of Copilot license at the moment. You have to have the license for Microsoft 365, as in Copilot for Microsoft 365, for it to show up inside of Outlook, inside of Excel, Word, OneNote, all the other kind of areas that we've talked about today. So if you've got any questions about licensing and things like that for Copilot, you can get in touch with us, as I say, either scan that barcode, fill out the survey and select that you'd like a call back, or you can email us at hello@valto.co.uk and we can get a call booked in to discuss your licensing. Next question, how much QA do you need to do on the completed Word docs / PowerPoint slides? Is it generally very accurate? I'm wondering if the time spent checking negates the time saved from creating the files manually. Really good question. I would say if you imagine however long it usually takes you, I would say for me at the moment, it would get me about 60% of the way there. So the time that it takes to remove something is not even a tenth of the time that it would take for me to write it from scratch. So I always think that this is going to be much quicker, especially the PowerPoint element of it. The PowerPoint element of it is really, really good, really, really powerful. With the Word bit, obviously, because it's a much bigger document, it does take a bit longer to kind of go through and remove any of the sections that maybe I don't want or edit or things like that. But I would say in general, it gets me about 60% of the way there. Maybe before it might taken me, say 2 days or something like that to write a report. Now it's well under a day to write a report using this kind of method that we've been looking at today. Another question here, having to dive off, great webinar, look forward to the next. Thanks to you're welcome, Thomas. Another question, have you implemented Copilot throughout Valto? Have you been able to quantify the amount of time it saves you? So yes, we've got it here at Valto. Every team is using it sort of obviously differently because it applies directly to their role. And today I'm just talking about how the consultants have been using it, but we use it in all sorts of different aspects of Valto. Myself nowadays, I do a lot of the kind of marketing side of things at Valto, and I use it for things like asking it to take a persona of, say, a chief marketing officer. Say, for example, I'm coming up with a new webinar or something like that, and I put together some ideas. I might then put that through Copilot and say, take the persona, the role of a chief marketing officer. What do you think about this as a webinar? What aspects of it should I change? What should I add, for example, to it? Another question here. Do you license all users or just those in certain roles? So good question. So starting off with what we tend to find, there's not many organizations which blanket roll it out to everybody on day one. That's just not really how a lot of people are doing this. Because it's such a revolutionary technology, what we're tending to find is people run kind of pilots, essentially, of who's getting to use this. So when we speak to a customer, one thing that we quite often advise is that they run a pilot group, but make sure that it's not essentially just techie people that have a license. Something that's very, very common is that you find that an organization will buy Copilot licenses and then only give it to their IT department. Now, basically what you're then doing is you're only looking at Copilot through the lens of an IT department. You're only looking at the ways that they could potentially be using it. Also, when you're giving it to people in the IT department, you are essentially giving it to people who are technical and know how to use software and know how to use user interfaces and things like that. So actually, instead, what I would often recommend is give a license. So look at all of your departments, get your departments, heads of department together, and then take take 2 people from each department. Take the most technical person, the person who's the most excited about Copilot, the person who's like, yes, we should be using this. This is great. This is fantastic, because that person is going to find all the reasons why that department should use it, all the ways that the times can be saved and things like that. But also, I would often recommend get the person who's the least sort of the technophobe, the person who isn't technical at all, and give them a license as well. The reason being is then you can kind of see both ends of the spectrum, and you can see, and you can almost take a medium where it's going to sit, the average of the department of how Copilot would be adopted. And then you can build in ways that people can then learn it together and build it together. Once you've kind of had that kind of pilot group put together, you could have say Microsoft Teams put together where all these different pilot users have got a Microsoft Teams where they can talk together to learn and share experience and say, this is how I'm using it. This is how this department's using it. Oh, that's great. I would like to use it like that. And you can kind of learn from each other in that way. Cool. Next question. Copilot in Teams is almost life-changing with the meeting notes, but I find for general things it lacks when compared to ChatGPT. Any tips on getting better results from it? So I would say you've got to be very specific to what it is that you want to get. The difference is ChatGPT is kind of almost like single track minded, looking just in one kind of way. And what I mean by that is it's only going to get its information from its model, from essentially like the internet essentially of information. Whereas Copilot is going to get its information from a similar kind of model, but also it knows all the meetings that you've taken place, all the chats that you've had, all of the Teams messages you've been sort of given, all of the emails, all of the documents that you've created and worked on and collaborated with and things like that. So it's going to have a much broader kind of answers for you. So you need to be a bit more kind of specific about what it is that you want to give it. And also, like with same with ChatGPT as well, in a sense, that Copilot needs guide rails. Any AI needs guide rails. You need to tell it what you want from it, but it's also equally as important to tell it what you don't want from it as well. So I've used prompts in Outlook before where I've said something like, I don't know, tell me my next available 10 minutes from my calendar, something like that. And what it's done is it's told me the next available, but the way it did it is it listed out every single meeting I had, and then it kind of said, here's your available slot. So actually, the next time I did something similar, I said, tell me my next available 10 minutes, but do not list out all of my other meetings. So that gave me a much better, much cleaner response with everything that I needed in it. Steve Smith, sorry I have to go. Great session. Thanks. You're more than welcome, Steve. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you again next time. We're going to do a final question now. Our data is particularly fragmented and unorganized. Presumably, you address your data before looking at Copilot, or would you suggest a simultaneous approach? Really good question. Now, with Copilot, you can tell it to ignore certain areas of data. So we all know there's no organization out there that's got their data 100% perfect. And if you are, great, because you're in the 1%. But most organizations, your data is not going to be perfect. And actually, there's a bit of a risk sometimes that if you would just apply AI like Copilot over the top of your data, it might surface things which are either sensitive because they've not been locked down properly, but nobody's ever noticed because they've never manually gone through to a SharePoint site, for example, and found that information. But Copilot doesn't see like that. It almost sees the world not in a kind of 2D way, but in a 3D way, and it can get access to things and so forth. But it'll only ever be able to access things that it has the permission to access from that user. So if your permissions and your security is not set up correctly, then it will go and access things that you maybe didn't know that it could access. So that's one of the key things that we cover as part of our Copilot workshop, is discussing the security of your data, how well organized is it, how well are things put together. So the short answer is you can run it in parallel. And the way that you run it in parallel is that you identify the high risk areas, you identify the areas which are perfect and are clean, and you can tell Copilot to ignore the areas that you don't want it to index, you don't want it to bring up answers to. So that is a potential way of doing it. The other way as well is just to go through the data, make sure it's cleansed, make sure it's up to date and organized. Make sure security is properly enabled with things like sensitivity labels and things like that. And you can go through it that way. So a lot of people, because they don't want to wait, they are taking the approach to run it in parallel. So they identify the areas that they know are clean, they're perfect. They make a plan, a strategy, a roadmap for all these other areas that do need to be locked down or cleansed or things like that. And they hide them initially from Copilot, and then they drip feed them through to Copilot over a period of time. So we've actually run out of time. We've overrun just by a couple of minutes, so I can't answer any more questions today. But if you do have any questions related to Copilot, or you would like to book a free 1-hour consultation, you can email us at hello@valto.co.uk. There's also the survey here, so please scan that and give us some feedback. Let us know where you are up to with your Copilot journey. And if you would like to schedule that free consultation and talk a bit more about how Valto can help you adopt Copilot, we'd love to hear from you today. Thank you very much for your time.